Well, you might think, oh, Shannon's having a bit of a mental break because hockey's not on. No. Um, I dreamt we were at a movie theater last night, my wife and I, and that I was watching a hockey game, and then I was mad because the hockey game didn't end until 11:30, and I didn't have my boards set up because I brought my boards with me to the movie theater. So I was worried about getting locked in the movie theater before I got the review done. So yeah, that's what happens. No hockey on. My brain goes, "What's going on here?" All right. Um, that out of the way. So it's All Star Day today, and we're gonna have the skills competition today, which is kind of fun. And I'll talk about that a bit when it comes to pass. And I wanted to talk about some guys who may or may not be at this game, who we are not talking about. And if we are talking about them, the feeling is you're not talking about them enough. Now, at the start of this, I'm going to say Ryan Strome is not mentioned in this video because everybody started talking about him. There's even an article today on how he doesn't want to get traded by the Rangers at the deadline. He wants to stay in New York. So he is generating definitely some interest in the media. And while, yes, his season's been surprising, I wouldn't put him in as underrated a category as these players. And in many cases, this is a matter of players just being overshadowed by other players on their own team. So a teammate overshadows them, and they might be quite happy about it. Now, the way I've ranked this isn't by who I think is better, it's just by points. So player A is above player B, it's because of points. And I decided to challenge myself for this by finding 4 left wingers, 4 centers, 4 right wingers, 6 defensemen, and 2 goalies. So this is a team of players who I feel are having good seasons, and it's being underrated. So, first up, Teuvo Teravainen of the Carolina Hurricanes. He's only got the 10 goals, but he's got 48 points. He's overshadowed by Aho. He's overshadowed by everything Svechnikov does. But he got those 38 assists through hard work, and he's actually having a very good season. I think if he scored more goals, I think we'd hear a lot more about him. But still, he's on pace for, 80 points? I think 80 points for him. That's not too bad for a guy that I don't hear a whole lot about. Next up, now, he is considered to be on the comeback, that this is a comeback season for him. But I still feel like Pacioretty doesn't necessarily get the attention now. And it may very well be because even though Vegas is a very well followed team compared to Montreal, Montreal, he was constantly under the microscope. He was the captain, so there had to be talks of he may be the worst captain. I remember hearing he's worst captain ever in the history of Montreal. Come on, be serious. Anyways, Pacioretty, I feel, is having a very good season. 21 goals, 26 assists. We're not talking about it a whole lot. All right, also left wing. The Washington Capitals, Jacob Vrana. Vrana, 22 goals, 18 assists. Pretty solid season for him overall. He's on pace for about 40 goals. And again, because we're looking at Ovechkin, because we talk about Carlson, because we talk about Samsonov and whether or not he's going to replace Holtby, because every time Kuznetsov gets a goal, he does the bird dance. At least it feels that way. I know he doesn't do it every time, but it feels like it. And because, Backstrom's contract and everything, it's easy to forget Vrana is a guy who's on pace for about 40 goals. Easy to forget that. The last left winger, I've talked about him a lot, but when you talk about the Tampa Bay Lightning, you're talking about Kucherov, Hedman, Vasilevsky, Stamkos, right? Killorn? Killorn's, I guess, a good player. Yeah, he's already got 20 goals. 20 goals, 19 assists, 39 points. He is having a career year. So it's one of those magical seasons he may never have again, but for right now, it's a career year. So your left wingers are Teravainen, Pacioretty, Vrana, and Killorn. Not a bad group. At center. So again, doing this at center, And this is a matter of, there's another thing too that may cause us to say, oh, they're probably not having a good year. In LA, a team that's having a miserable season, it's easy to forget the Kopitar with 17 goals, 26 assists, 43 points. Still on pace for about 70. It's a drop from his career highs, and he does tend to fluctuate, but he is having a good year. And again, because the Kings are just absolutely miserable on the road, because the Kings got off to an iffy start and it hasn't got better from there, it's easy to overlook the Kopitars actually had a pretty good year. Next up, Schenn. I'm not talking about Luke Schenn. Just want to make that clear. Luke Schenn is not a center; he's a defenseman. Braden Schenn plays in St. Louis, and he's a center. And I'm using okay, I'm going to say this too. I'm using the positions as they are shown on the NHL website. So if the player on the board is playing center this week, right wing this week, left wing this week, that's not something I'm concerned with. I'm just going with 4 guys who are listed as left wingers, 4 listed as centers, and 4 listed as right wingers. Braden Schenn, pretty decent season so far, 17 goals, 24 assists. We're talking about Perron. We're talking about O'Reilly. Is Pietrangelo going to stick around? Hey, did you see Jake Allen's having a good year behind Bennington? It all kind of overshadows that Braden Schenn's had a good year. Next up, we're going to go with an Islander here. Yes, I can write out St. Louis. I don't have to start getting lazy just because of LA. I will write NYI, though, for New York Islanders. Brock Nelson is having a 30-goal season of his own. And that's kind of sort of amazing because Barry Trotz's system doesn't always lead to a lot of goals being scored. And this is a team that, a lot of people believe, myself included, needs another goal scorer. But Nelson already has 20 goals and 18 assists. So he is not a part of the issue when it comes to the Islanders' overall scoring. He's been fantastic. And again, he's had a pretty good year. I did try to make sure that I was using a variety of teams for this and I wasn't just going with the same team over and over again. Columbus. We have talked about Columbus a lot, right? And when you're talking about Columbus and their forwards, I think it's easy to see it as just this large homogenous group. That being said, at 15 goals, 23 assists, Pierre-Luc Dubois is having a very good year. And does he get overshadowed by teammates, or is this just a team that we all kind of went, they're not going to do anything? And so maybe they're not paying attention to the individual efforts as much as they would be on a team like Toronto, Rangers, a team that might get more exposure. I don't know, but Dubois has grown, and I still think there's more offensive upside there. I look at 38 points, and I think, well, Dubois can do better than that. Dubois can be a point-a-game player throughout a full season. He can get to 82 points. At times, he looks like a guy who can score at will. So, Pierre-Luc Dubois, I have on the board as a guy who's having an underrated, pretty decent season. All right, on right wing. Now, here's where it gets kind of weird. I'm going to put the name up here because there's going to be people saying, wait, you can't be underrated if you're in Toronto. You can, though. Because with Mitch Marner, we talk a lot about Matthews. We talk about Tavares. We talk even about Nylander now because Nylander's having this great bounce-back season. He's already passed 20 goals. We talk about Riley. What is the blue line going to do without Riley? I think Marner kind of gets lost in the shuffle. I think when people talk about Mitch Marner, all you hear is, well, look how much money he made. He's not worth that kind of money. Meanwhile, he's got 13 goals, 34 assists, 47 points in 37 games? Yeah, he's pretty good. If he played a full season at that total, he'd end up with over 100 points. But I think that he gets underrated because people just look and they go, well, yeah, it's 34 helpers. It's his line mates. It's his line mates. It's just his line mates. I don't remember hearing that with guys in the past generations who were big with assists, who got a lot of assists. I don't remember hearing, well, it's just his line mates. Joe Thornton in his prime, I don't, and again, Adam Oates would be one that would come to mind. a lot of players who've been pretty good setup men that you don't just go, it's just his line mates. But I think because of Marner's money, I think there are people who've soured on Marner, and so they'll just find whatever reason to try to diminish what he's doing. He's having a pretty darn solid season, even while Toronto as a team isn't. Toronto as a team is not having the kind of season that they had envisioned before the season started. And we'll see whether or not they can pull out of that after the All-Star break. But I would not say that Marner's been a problem for them. Next up. Now, this one's kind of... there's a qualifier with this, too. I have certainly talked a lot about Brock Boeser and how much faith I have in Brock Boeser to be able to pull through any scoring slumps he might go through. I don't worry about goal scoring slumps when it comes to Brock Boeser. I don't worry about confidence. I don't worry about his ability to bounce back. I've seen enough of Brock Boeser over the last couple of years to say, yeah, he'll be fine. It'll be fine. And for Brock in Vancouver, I think because he's so associated with goal scoring, that when he puts up 16 goals, 24 assists, he's 27 assists, 43 points, I think people fixate on the goals. Line A is one I almost put on this board too, and then I thought, no, we've talked a lot about Line A, and the media's talked a lot about Line A and how he's rounded out his game. I don't know that much attention has been paid to Boeser as has been paid to Line A. And again, it's just, Line A is the bigger name of the two. And you're going to get more clicks talking about Line A than you are talking about Boeser. That's just how media works now. It's not right, but it is how media works now. So for me, Boeser, I don't think that his season has been as respected for what it is as it probably should be. Because seeing him putting up a bunch of assists, I'm actually happy about that because it does free him up so that the goals are going to be there. He is going to get his share of goals. Next up on right wingers. Evgeny Dadonov of the Florida Panthers. We talk about Huberdeau. We talk about Barkov. We talk about Bobrovsky in net. And then there's Dadonov. All Dadonov has is 23 goals right now at the break. So he's going to hit 30. 17 assists, 40 points. I think his career high in goals is 28. He's going to beat that. He's having an excellent year. The goal scoring has just been fantastic for him thus far this year. But again, your line mates can overshadow you. And sometimes with a goal scorer, guy gets goals like this, they might say, yeah, but how many of those are garbage goals? Yeah, he's having a good year. But look who he plays with. Drives me nuts. Why would he be on that line if he wasn't any good? That's a question I've always had, which is when somebody's having a really good year and somebody says, well, yeah, but look at his line mates. My counter is always, well, how did he get on that line if he isn't any good? If it's really just, well, you could put anybody on that line, well, then why don't they? Why don't we see just a regular rotation of different guys who need points on that line if it's easy to score? So I give full credit to Dadonov for all the goals he's scored. I think he's been playing very well, and I don't think we talk about it much because he's in Florida, which is why this is not the last time we will discuss a Florida Panther on this list. And last off, Connor Brown of the Ottawa Panthers. Connor Brown, 10 goals, 21 assists. He's had some dry spells when it comes to scoring, but you know what? Connor Brown, who could have come out of Toronto, gone to Ottawa, and could have been kind of pouty about it. No, he's playing very well, and I'm kind of more impressed with him as a Senator than I was with him as a Leaf. I think there's a lot of scoring there, and I think his value has definitely gone up since he went to Ottawa. Now, if you're Ottawa, there's no harm in keeping Brown around. He's not an older player. And also, if you decide, well, we could move him, you can probably get something substantial back for him right now. Like I said, 10 goals, 21 assists, 31 points. He's having a pretty good year on a team that is going to have trouble scoring, has had trouble with scoring, and he's kind of been one of their leaders. It really has been amazing to watch the Senators this year and see different players really step up. Some have stepped back, but some have stepped up. And to me, Connor Brown's one of the ones that stepped up. And I really think it's increased his value, both to the Senators if they keep him and to the Senators if they decide to trade him. Okay, defenseman. Now, again, I asked myself, okay, now there's guys that I may be talking about, but do I hear a lot about them? And Keith Yandle's one that I say, not really. No. Keith Yandle currently sits with 5 goals, 34 assists, 39 points. Pretty darn solid player for the Florida Panthers. He's played very well this year. And there are teams that could use an offensive defenseman like him, Florida being one of those teams. Florida's having a pretty good season. And at some point, a guy like Keith Yandle might get recognized for just how solid he is on that team. He may not. And along with him, also in Florida, is Aaron Ekblad. Aaron Ekblad, currently with 5 goals, 23 assists, 28 points. He's had a good year. Now, what drives me nuts with Ekblad is this. Because Ekblad was a number 1 overall draft pick, he gets viewed as a flop, whereas a guy, he never really lived up to his pre-draft billing. So I look back at his draft year, and I'm looking at guys who got drafted that year, and I'm thinking, maybe he wouldn't have got drafted first if you do the redraft. I'll give you that. But he at least has to go top 5. He's still a solid defenseman. He still plays a ton of minutes for the Florida Panthers. And it's not just all about scoring with Ekblad either. At least it better not be. When you're a top 2 defenseman, if it's just all about the scoring, then your defense is obviously not going to be as good. And I think Ekblad's been solid all around for them. Norris winner? No. No, I'm not saying he's in the Norris conversation at all. But I think sometimes it's easy to just look at Ekblad and say, oh, that was a first rounder. That was number 1 that Florida wasted. I don't agree. Because you need that defenseman who can play 25 minutes if needed during a game. Ekblad can do that. And if they had drafted one of the star forwards that year, they would still be seeking that defenseman that can play those minutes. So, yeah. So Florida's defense, I think, overall gets sort of underrated. All right. Detroit has a player that I think doesn't get necessarily talked about enough, having a pretty decent season, and that's Philip Roenick of the Detroit Red Wings. Roenick has had a very good season. He's played a ton of minutes, and you got to think that when you're playing for Detroit and you've only won 12 games to this part of the year, it has to be frustrating. It has to be one of those situations where you're like, oh, we're probably going to lose again tonight. All right, so I respect players that go out, make a good effort every night, do their best, understand that, yeah, they're probably going to lose, but they still go out there and they're professionals about it. There are players that aren't. There are players that kind of tune out and zone out, and then you'll see fans saying, well, I can understand because look who they play for. I respect a guy like Roenick who has a solid season for a team that isn't necessarily playing very well. So his 9 goals, 17 assists. It's not bad. Also on the blue line, as we move down the defenseman, and again, this is by scoring. Sergachev. I love what Tampa Bay's done with Sergachev. His first year out, they gave him very little ice time. So protected minutes. He scored really well, protected minutes. He's slowly been allowed more ice time. He has slowly been given more responsibility. And it's still a work in progress. But right now he's sitting with 7 goals, 18 assists, 25 points. So he's on pace for about 40. And that's not a bad season for a defenseman. And I think Tampa Bay's done a very good job with him. And when you consider they got Hedman, obviously, if you got Hedman on one pairing and if Sergachev reaches his potential on that second pairing, that's pretty solid. That's pretty solid all-around defense. And Sergachev gets overshadowed. He gets overshadowed by McDonough. He gets overshadowed by Hedman. He's having a pretty good year. And that's part of what gets you on this board. Are you being overshadowed by a teammate? If the answer is yes, get on the board. All right, next up. Now, I've talked about this player a lot. I've talked about Marino since before the season started. And I remember talking up Marino after a preseason game where there were Penguins fans saying, don't praise him too much. A, we're playing all of our scrubs. These guys aren't making the team. And B, as a result, it makes him look better than he really is. So he's probably not going to play. Well, he broke camp with the team. With all the injuries they've had, a lot of those scrubs that were in that game have had to play. And Pittsburgh looks like geniuses for playing all the B-level players as much as they did in the preseason, because they have been needed a lot during the regular season. And Marino is just having a really, really good year for a defenseman who's in his rookie year, and he's got 4 goals, 19 assists. That's just solid. And he's playing a ton of minutes. He's playing more than 20 minutes a night. But again, you're going to look at Pittsburgh. You're going to talk about Malkin. You're going to talk about Crosby. Probably going to talk about Rust as well. Rust isn't on this board because people talked about him a ton. And you're going to talk about Jari and net and the whole Matt Murray. And Marino, it's easy to lose him in the shuffle. So I figured throw him on the board. Last defenseman. No. Come on. There you go. Yay, remembered how to spell Colorado. I'm ready for a nap. Ian Cole, Colorado Avalanche. Ian Cole has had a very good year, and his plus-minus is excellent. I know there are people who don't like plus-minus, but it is an indicator when his plus-minus is dramatically better. Now, I thought about putting Sam Girard on the board, also of the Avalanche, and I thought, no, we've talked about Girard. People talk about Girard, especially with that contract he signed. Ian Cole is just kind of another member of that blue line, right? You can talk about Eric Johnson. You can talk about Cale Makar, definitely. And so it's easy to kind of lose Cole in the shuffle. And I think he's been really good for them. And he also has 4 goals and 19 assists. So 23 points, not a bad year so far for Cole. So I figured he belonged on that blue line. In net. In net's a little trickier because it is harder for a goaltender to just slide under the radar. But on some level, that's been the case with Robin Lehner of the Chicago Blackhawks. Because Chicago's outside of the playoffs, because Lehner left the Islanders, and with the Islanders, you know, there was some belief that he'd had this fantastic year. And because his numbers aren't as good as last year's, it's easy to overlook Robin Lehner. Really, really easy to overlook Robin Lehner. And I think to some extent, when we're talking about who's having a really good year, it's kind of easy to, because he'll every now and then have a game where it's kind of a meltdown, where he allows a bunch of goals. It's kind of easy to focus on that. But Lehner has been really, really solid for the Hawks. He really has. And then also with goaltenders, and again, it is tough for a goaltender to fly under the radar. It is the toughest place to be underrated. It is the easiest place to be criticized. And so I went with a goaltender who knows about being criticized over the years. Reimer. Reimer's gone through the mill. And I've always liked James Reimer. Always. I've always thought that he was a good goaltender. And I liked him in Toronto. I liked him in Florida. The problem was that his numbers over the last couple of years in Florida were kind of miserable. Now, Lehner is at 15-8-4 with a .922 save percentage, which is a great save percentage. And Reimer's right behind him. He's got an 11-6-1 record and a .921 save percentage. Now, Reimer's had some games where he's looked kind of shaky. Not great. Maybe you could point out, well, he is backup, though, so, you know, he doesn't have the pressure that Mrazek has. But he's been playing more lately than he was at the start of the year. I think he's having a good year, and I think he's underrated. So there's my picks. Let me know your picks in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video, and hey, I thought this would be a fun thing to do. I was going to do like 10 guys having good seasons we're not talking about. And then I started getting into the stats, and I'm like, there's more than 10. You got to do a team. So there's my team. Let me know yours. I will talk to you again soon.